The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Glory to you, O Lord. At that time, John summoned 2 of his disciples and sent them to the Lord to ask, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we look for another?" When the men came to the Lord, they said, "John the Baptist has sent us to you to ask, 'Are you the one who is to come, or should we look for another?'" At that time, Jesus cured many of their diseases, sufferings, and evil spirits. He also granted sight to many who were blind. And Jesus said to them in reply, "Go and tell John what you have seen and heard. The blind regain their sight, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the poor have the good news proclaimed to them. And blessed is the one who takes no offense at me." The Gospel of the Lord. It's, of course, a very close parallel to the gospel that we had on Sunday. So I'm prepared to give another 22-minute homily. That's all out there. There is some interesting things here. Of course, expectations, right? And what are John's expectations? Are they being fulfilled? Is he ready to acknowledge them? All this kind of thing. And I think for us the same this Advent season. Right, we take on our Advent disciplines as a way to dethrone imposter kings, as a way to unseat counterfeit gods, as a way to embolden our own hearts or have our hearts be aflame with divine charity in order to sign ourselves over to God and what He wants to do. In other words, to reorient our expectations about what our lives are about and what God wants for us and what He wants us to be a part of. Right? We have to do some. We have to really allow God to do some of the brush cleaning work in our lives. Right? He has to clear the ground for us. He has to till the soil. Right, this kind of thing, and the practices that we take on are all intended to accomplish that, so that we can be prepared, we can be readily obedient when His word comes to us. Yeah, so there's a certain amount of the unseating of expectations that happens as like a natural kind of process in this season. Should we be taking it on? And I have a little bit of a reflection about for myself as well as you, whether or not that's happening, and like I get it, right? There are things going on right now, things around us, things that we're doing, things that whatever people are inviting us to, right? Well, I don't know. It's Christmas everywhere. I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of distressed by this reality. It isn't Christmas in here. This is Advent. Right? If we want to enjoy a fruitful Christmas season, we have to give ourselves over to Advent. And I'm going to stand up here likely every year until I die and say that, and no one's going to take me seriously on the point, and we're all going to suffer for it. Anyway, I won't go too far down that road. Someone yesterday sent me a very nice note about the fact that you're very good teaching us even when you're cranky. So was I cranky? Okay, now I'm cranky. It's like okay. I'm a crank. This is very different from being cranky. It's like I'm intent on accomplishing the goals that God has given me. So I have to preach it, no matter what the reception is. But the overturning of expectation, the giving ourselves over to Christ, how is that going to happen unless we give it some attention and energy, right? How is that going to happen unless we say, yeah, I'm going to do these things that enable the Lord to move more freely in my heart and life. I'm going to do these things that will open me up to be more docile to Him, to receiving the great love that He has for me, and that my heart, my life will center on that reality, so that I can be free to move about for Him, right, and to advance His plan and purpose. I want to look back to the first reading, and you see this. It's beautiful. We read through Isaiah this Advent season. We read through every Advent season. I am the Lord, there is no other, right? He starts talking about, these are kind of like relatively agricultural images, right? But we have some sense of them as well. Let justice descend, O heavens, like dew from above, like gentle rain, let the skies drop it down. And then he's talking about, right, this is justice, that receiving the love of God, receiving, his breath, his sustenance, his own life. Justice, right? Justice comes forth. We have to recognize the significance here, and as it's, as the picture is forming here, we see the intertwined nature of holiness and justice. And I don't want to use this to say we have to allow this to reset our expectations as well, reform our expectations. We as a people are given over to God's kingdom of holiness and justice. And I want to say this: we have a lot of room to grow in our relationship with God, and our growth into our relationship with God, our growth into the eternal exchange of glorifying love that God is itself the key to the revitalization of the entire world. Yes, I spend time with people who want to take on projects of justice, like, how do we help people in need? We can identify this, whether it's a marginalized group or, like in our terminology, like an underserved group or something like that. And how do we bring resources to bear in their lives that will kind of create a level playing field for them with the rest of society? What I want to say, this is not. I want to say this is nonsense. I want to say it's complete nonsense, right? It's not, but it's not complete nonsense. But I'm struggling holding that off, because the reality is that what is a level playing field, right? Like when we go out to live our lives as people of justice, and we are people of justice, or we want to bring God's righteousness to bear. We have been set right in order to help set right the world. But if it's that flat understanding of we just have to raise up people who are at deficit, let's get everybody back to zero and call it quits, this is complete nonsense. Love demands much more than that. Yet love demands the commitment of our entire life. It's not, we can't go out and say, I'm going to help put the world back in order, and as soon as I'm done, I'll check the box and go home. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. And if God's renewed people believe that it works like that, the world has no chance at all. So think about the extravagance of the nature of the love of God. We're supposed to be people then who are made to be extravagant in giving ourselves away. And again, the relationship between holiness and justice, the closer we grow into God's own life, or the more we're able to embody his own life of love as he pours it out freely for us, the great, or the higher the pitch of justice, right? The higher the pitch becomes of what we consider justice to be. God has given us everything. He gives us his own body and blood to eat, right? To be our sustenance. So then what is our view of justice? What does the world, or what does God demand as a result of his giving us his entire life? Right? It's a total reframe, I believe. It's a total reframe of justice. We have to give ourselves away in proportion to what we receive. This is the nature. This is the combined nature of holiness and justice. So this is, again, the gospel resetting our expectations, resetting John's expectations. Yeah, Jesus is the Messiah, but it looks a little bit different than what we would otherwise anticipate. Doesn't matter. You got to follow him, and we know that we've been called by him. We're here because we've been called by Jesus, and he is then to become the center of our hearts and lives. Just one word about St. John of the Cross, right? He's a great ascetic. Do we know what ascetic means? Asceticism is training. He's a great ascetic and mystical theologian and philosopher. And himself lived, it wasn't really austere, say austere life. That's our flat worldly way of saying it. St. John of the Cross lived a life of great love and saw that the demands of love required him to pursue God with everything he had. And we know that he had this sense of like our hearts being purified by God for him and for his service. Right? So like he had this sense of the night of the senses where we will be stripped away of these pleasures and comforts and the rest. Like God would be at work in our hearts and lives to liberate us from things like comfort and pleasure and sometimes sensible consolation, right? So and then it's the night of the soul where even our sense of being with God was stripped away so that we could desire him more. Yeah, but the training, I say, he's an ascetic, great ascetic. The training was all about being led into a life of love. It's John of the Cross, and it's a paraphrase, who says something to the effect of, in the evening of life, we will be judged on love alone. We will be judged on love alone. Right? So do our lives reflect love? So again, all the ascetic practices in the world, and John of the Cross was persecuted for trying to implement them in the Carmelite community. Like all the ascetic practices in the world don't mean a thing unless they open us up to love, and unless they commit us to meeting the demands of love. That is the reset of expectations that we need. Why? Because we're drowning in the culture around us. We need the proper culture of the church. We need the proper culture, the cult of Christ Jesus to come through. And it means that we have to be dedicated to love. We've received love alone. We receive love alone in the flesh every day. We now have to be committed to bringing forth the fruits of love and meeting the demands of love wherever it is that God sends us today.